Okay, thank you very much. It's really a great honor to be here. Firstly, I want to thank Rav Moshe for organizing the Shir, L'zecher Nishmas, Rav David Yitzchak, Ben Rav Moshe. The Shamash have an Aliyah. You should have a Lichtiga Gan Eden. Be'ezras Hashem, you should be a Me'etz Yosher for the whole Mishpacha. You should have only simchas and good health and happiness in your family. You should be a Me'etz Yosher for the whole Kehillah and for all of Klal Yisrael. And in that Zechus, Be'ez Hashem, the zchus of getting together this evening in preparation for the 3 weeks and the important topic of being Mitzapeh Yeshua, Shetaka, bring it ever closer. For me personally, it's a big zchus to be together with the Rav. I grew up in the shul of the Rav's uncle, by Rabbi Yitzchak Izbi, Zechatzak Levracha. And I have to say, seeing the Rav, I see a very strong resemblance, actually. So it brings back good memories for me, and it's very special for me to be here. So during the 3 weeks, it's not only a time of Avelos, but it's also a time of hope, because we have a Mesorah, not just from Chazal, actually from the Psukim themselves, that Tzoim HaRavi, V'Tzoim HaChamishi, V'Tzoim HaShvi, V'Tzoim HaSiri, Yeh L'Beis Yehuda, that not only will the days of Shavas B'Tammuz and Tisha be nishapech, but the entire period of time will be nishapech. These 3 weeks will be nishapech. They will turn into Yom Tovim. Actually, the first parsha we're going to read in the 3 weeks is Parshas Pinchas. It's interesting. Parshas Pinchas is a parsha of the Moyadim. What's the appropriateness of reading about the Moyadim in the 3 weeks? Because ultimately the 3 weeks will turn into Yemei Moyed. So there's an amazing observation of the Rishner in Parshas Pinchas. It's an incredible observation. I never saw it inside, but they say it over in his name, that if you look in Parshas Pinchas, between all the Yomim Tovim, it's a Parshas Susuma. There's a Samach. Except for between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah, there's a Pei. Why, says the Rishner? As if to say the slot is open, it's available, there'll be a new Yom Tif that we're going to put there, and that is the Yom Tif of the 3 weeks, Shavas B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av, so to speak. It's in preparation. It's already, there's a Pesach there for us to be able to be Mahapech this time of the year. You know, we say in the davening, we say this every single day, it's kedai to really pay attention to the meaning of these words. We say in Samach David, we say the words, Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayoim. Ribbon, we anticipate, we await for Yeshua the whole day. Okay? So it doesn't just mean once in a while we await Yeshua, maybe a few days a year, or every day. The entire day we tell the Ribbon Shem, we await your Yeshua. What exactly does that mean? We await the Yeshua of HaKadosh Baruch Hu the entire day. So that's what I would like to talk about tonight. The Rav reminded me tonight is the art side of the Archaim HaKadosh. I had this chus many times to be by the kever of the Archaim HaKadosh in Har HaZeisim. But I also had the chus to be at the kever of the ancestors of the Archaim HaKadosh in Morocco. I want to tell you something very interesting about the Archaim HaKadosh. I have a sefer at home called Chachmei Marrakesh. Okay, it's the biggest sefer that I own and the biggest sefer you ever saw. It's like the telephone book. And it's pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. And I'm pretty sure of the thousands of chachamim that are in this book, you never heard of any of them. Maybe you heard of one or two. Hayitachen, now Marrakesh is not Morocco. Marrakesh is one city in Morocco. But there are many, many cities in Morocco. There's Marrakesh, there's Fez, there's Casablanca. So this is one city in Morocco with thousands of chachamim, and I'm sure we have over here big loimdim and big Yodea Sefer, who could name every Rosh Hashiva and Achroin, and every little parish in the back of the Gemara. You know, maybe even Reb Shmuel Shmelka Toivish, you know, one of the Hagoyis V'Tziyunim in the back of the Gemara. And the Chachmei Morocco are, nobody knows who they are. The only one you probably ever heard of are somebody named Ben Attar, because he's probably related to the Archaim HaKadosh. So in the introduction, now, this sefer was put together by the son of Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, Rabbi Yosef Hillel. And it's an amazing introduction. He's like, why doesn't anybody know about the Chachmei Morocco? He said a very simple reason. Because Morocco didn't have something that Europe had. Morocco didn't have printing presses. So you had thousands and tens of thousands of tzaddikim, chachamim, mikubalim, and they wrote hundreds and thousands of pages of chidushim, but they weren't able to publish it because there were no printing presses, including the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Now, where did the Orach Chaim HaKadosh come from? The Orach Chaim HaKadosh came from Morocco. He decided at the end of his life to go to Eretz Yisrael. On the way to Eretz Yisrael, he stopped off in Livorno. In Livorno, he met something called the printing press. He gave the folios of Orach Chaim HaKadosh to print in Livorno. That's how we know about the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, because he had the good mazel to be zoicha to publish a svarim. So, you know, it's you got to be in the right place at the right time. So I feel like tonight I'm in Mordy Shteibel, the right place at the right time with the right people. Oilam, Shana, Nefesh, everything's converging right over here in preparation for the 3 weeks. The Gemara tells us a teaching of Rava, a very important teaching. The Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Aleph, Amar Rava, that after Maidich Siv, B'haya Emunas Yitecha, Choisen Yeshuais, Chachma Vadas, 6 words in Yeshaya. Says Rava, Amar Rava, after Lachar Mevasim Shana, they're going to ask you 6 big questions. Number 1, Nasasav Nasata Be'emuna, did you work honestly? Number 2, Kavata Itim La Torah, did you establish times to learn? And number 3, Tzipisa Liyeshua, did you await the coming of Mashiach? Asakta Be'per V'rivya, and then Tzipisa Liyeshua. Yeah? So I'm looking at this Gemara. The Gemara is saying that after 120, they're going to ask, what, only 6 questions? The whole test is going to be 6 questions? They're not going to ask anything else? I mean, don't you have to keep all the mitzvahs? There's 613 mitzvahs. And they're mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. And the Shulchan Aruch is also pretty big. And I assume they're going to ask whether you kept all the mitzvahs and you kept all the halachos. So what's Rava saying that Lachar Meir Besim Shan, they're going to ask 6 questions? Obviously, a person's going to have to give an accountability for the whole Torah. But Rava's saying primarily there's 6 big questions that you're going to have to answer after 120. What are they? So the first question, did you work honestly? Okay, I understand. You know, you're not to steal. You have to tell the truth. These are pretty important things. Kavati Yitim La Torah, you know, everybody knows the importance of Talmud Torah. The brother of the Goin, Rabbi Avram Achi HaGoin, wrote a Sefer Malas HaTorah. He has a Chidush Noira in the Sefer Malas HaTorah. He says that every time the Torah says to learn Torah is a separate mitzvah, which means every time you learn Torah, you're Mekayim, not one mitzvah d'oraisa of Talmud Torah, you're Mekayim 30-something mitzvahs of Talmud Torah, because the Torah says V'limadatem, the Torah says V'shinantem, the Torah says L'man Yilmud. Every expression of Talmud Torah, the brother of the Goin says, is a separate Kiyum HaMitzvah. So Torah, we know the importance of Torah. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos that children came into the Beis Medrash and they taught something that even from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, nobody ever knew. They darshan the Aleph Beis, Gimel Daled. Aleph Beis, Aleph Bina, learn Torah. Gimel Daled, Gimel Dalim, do Chesed. Chafetz Chaim points out, by the way, I'm just coming back, not mamish just, but pretty recently, from the kever of the Chafetz Chaim. So we went to Lithuania in order to go to Belarus. And the reason we wanted to go to Belarus is we're coming out soon. It's mamish chaval. We have a sefer coming out on the Chafetz Chaim Sefer Tzipisa Liyeshua, a translation, explanation. And I was hoping to be able to bring it because that's what we're talking about tonight. So but we wanted to go to the Chafetz Chaim's kever, so to speak, to like Netilas Rishus, like to get Rishus to publish Tzipisa Liyeshua. Somebody asked me, how do you know what he's going to answer? You know, how you know he's going to answer? So they say, you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to, you know? You only ask questions you know the answer to. Anyway, so we went to Lithuania, we went to Vilna. We're walking the streets of Vilna, and there's a statue there of a water carrier, a bronze-plated statue of a water carrier. And I was very taken by this, because I was, doing research on the life of the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, when he was a young boy, he went to learn in a Beis Medrash in Vilna. There was somebody there in this Beis Medrash who was the head of the Maskilim in Vilna. Probably you heard of, Mendelssohn was the head of the Maskilim in Germany. But there were Maskilim in Vilna. The Maskilim in Vilna were very powerful. And there was the father of all the Maskilim, who the Chafetz Chaim cursed. The Chafetz Chaim put a klala. His name was Adam HaKohen Levinson. And he was lurking in the Beis Medrash of the Chafetz Chaim to try to chap the Chafetz Chaim. And he would strike up the Chafetz Chaim in conversation, long, drawn-out conversation to try to lure the Chafetz Chaim into the Maskilim. Until one day, a water carrier came over to the Chafetz Chaim. He said, "Do you know who you're talking to? The man is not a Shomer Torah Mitzvos. The man is purest. Don't talk to him. What are you talking to him? You don't know what his plan is?" And the Chafetz Chaim, apparently, he was at least choishesh for this Lashon Hara. He ran out of Vilna and he never returned to this yeshiva again. He ran. For the rest of the Chafetz Chaim's life, he said, "I thank the water carrier of Vilna. He saved the Mishnah Berurah. He saved Sefer Chafetz Chaim. He saved me for Klal Yisrael." So I saw a statue of a water carrier in Vilna. I said, this must be a tribute to the water carrier that probably saved Klal Yisrael. Now we're headed to Belarus. Now, back in the day, if you want to go to Belarus, you need a visa. There was an app. If you go to Australia, you need to get an app. You put in your information, and you get the permission al yedei this app. They used to be able to do that for Belarus. No more. Like a week before our trip, they made a new law. You want to go to Belarus, you need to go down to the embassy in Washington. So we had to overnight our passports to a guy in the embassy in Washington, who is our shliach, and you give them the passport. They send the passport back. There's this stamp and silver. You never saw a passport. They completely. That page of the passport is I don't know what. Is a diploma from the 13th century. Okay, so now we're ready to go to Belarus. We're on now. In order to get in, you need to take an officially licensed bus from Lithuania to Belarus. The bus leaves at 12:30 a.m. Motzei Shabbos. We're on the bus. I'm sitting on the bus. I'm preparing whatever shiurim I wanted to give by the Chafetz Chaim. All of a sudden, I look up. There's a flashlight in my eye. I look up. There's a soldier there. He looked like from 1947. He has this big brim. Passport. Vayafeg liboy. Where's my passport? What am I going to do? They're, outside, they're like dogs walking back and forth, barking. You feel like you're in the 1940s in communist Russia. Anyway, we got through the Lithuanian border. We got through the Belarus border. And we made it to Radin. And unbelievably, on the kever of the Chafetz Chaim, you have a list of all the Sfarim the Chafetz Chaim wrote. The order, if I remember correctly, was Sefer Chafetz Chaim, Mishnah Berurah, Shmiras Halashon, Avas Chesed, Machane Yisrael, Nidche Yisrael, a list of all the Sfarim, and then there's an empty space. So we like to darshan the empty space. We have to be mashlim Tzipisa Yeshua. Why? The Chafetz Chaim could not publish Tzipisa Yeshua in his lifetime. Why not? Because of censorship. The censors did not let the Chafetz Chaim publish the Sefer. So I couldn't figure out exactly what the censorship issue was with Sefer Tzipisa Yeshua. But when the Chafetz Chaim came, the first Sefer the Chafetz Chaim published was Sefer Chafetz Chaim. He published it in his 30s. And he came to the censor. The censor's name was Joshua Steinberg. And Joshua Steinberg was also a maskil. And turns out Joshua Steinberg is the son-in-law of Adam HaKohen Levinson. And Steinberg was having Chalishas Hadas. He said, "I can't believe it. You're Yisrael Meir Kagan? You're the boy that my father-in-law tried to capture and we lost him? My father-in-law went to the grave, never forgave himself that he let you go." And now Steinberg is the censor for Sefer Chafetz Chaim. I think that's divine punishment for them, that they had to give the shtempel to approve Sefer Chafetz Chaim. They're probably hake yashinov. They didn't know what to do with themselves. Turns out, and Steinberg was mavaza the Chafetz Chaim, because Chafetz Chaim did not dress in rabbinic garb. Chafetz Chaim dressed like a simple Polish peasant, and he was mocking the Chafetz Chaim, he was mocking the Chafetz Chaim's clothing, and at one point in time, the Chafetz Chaim let out of his mouth, Goyim lahavdil. And Steinberg said, lahavdil? No, all mankind, we're all equal. So you could imagine, if the word lahavdil didn't get by the censors, a sefer about anticipating and awaiting Mashiach, there's no way that ever passed censorship. The Chafetz Chaim could not publish Tzipis Yeshua. In 1929, anybody know the Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law's name? Reb Tzvi Hersh Levinson, not him, the other one. You know the other one? What? He had a son-in-law, Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen wrote a sefer, Avodas HaKarbanos. I don't know why. Art Scroll published it recently in English. Avodas, on how to do the Avodah. It's called Avodas HaKarbanos. In 1929, Aaron HaKohen, son of Chafetz Chaim, published Tzipis Yeshua in Tel Aviv. He writes on the title page, my father-in-law was not able to publish the sefer in his lifetime. He had to put it in a newspaper. The name of the newspaper is Hapeles. You ever hear of the newspaper Hapeles? So I figure, so the Chafetz Chaim wrote it in Hapeles. Hapeles was written between 1900 and 1905. All the newspapers are available on Hebrew books. They're all available on Oitzer HaChachma. I went through every single Hapeles. Tzipis Yeshua is not there. Meanwhile, in 1921, there was a rabbi in Boston. His name was Yosef Meir Jacobson. He was a Talmud of the Chafetz Chaim. He learned in Radin. He published Tzipisa Yeshua in Boston in 1921 with a Yiddish translation. Apparently, the Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law didn't know about it. How would he know about it? He's on the other end of the world. But I'm looking, what did the Chafetz Chaim's son-in-law mean that it was originally published in Hapeles? Hapeles was published by Eliyahu Akiva Rabinowitz, who after Hapeles closed down in 1905, wrote a new newspaper from something like 1910 to 1915. The name of the newspaper, you ready for this? It only lasted for 5 years. It's called Hamodia. And then it closed down. The current Hamodia has no connection, I don't think, with that Hamodia. This was written by a great Rav. He's called the Paltava Rav. A friend of mine, Daniel Weinstein, said he searched on the National Library of Israel, has a collection of all the ancient Hamodiyas, and in issue 30, 1913, the Chafetz Chaim published Tzipis Yeshua as a magazine in the newspaper Hamodia. Like in the Yated, you have the newspaper and you have the magazine. That's how the Chafetz Chaim published. He had to slip it into a newspaper because the censors would not let him publish the sefer Tzipis Yeshua. So let's come back to Rava, okay? Coming back to Rava. Rava says that Lachar Me'ah V'Esrim Shana, they're going to ask you 6 questions. I don't understand. They're going to ask you a lot more than 6 things. These are not the only 6 things they're going to ask. Must be, what Rava's saying is that even though there are a lot of things we have to learn about and be Mekayim and observe, these are the 6 biggies. And one of them is going to be Tzipis Yeshua. Did you anticipate, did you await the coming of Mashiach? I have one simple question on this Gemara. Really? Tzipis Yeshua is one of the big 6 things? Presumably then, if it's one of the big 6 things, it's got to be mentioned somewhere in the Chumash. Does it even say anything about Mashiach in the Chumash? Does the word Mashiach appear in the Chumash? No, it doesn't talk about it. The Rambam, Hilchos Malachim, says, the pasuk V'shav Hashem v'kibetzcha mikol ha'amim. But now you're going to say that one of the main things that we need to do in Olam Hazeh is to anticipate, to await the coming of Mashiach. Where does it even say it? So you say, it says it in the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im talk about awaiting the coming of Mashiach a lot. Is that good enough? Doesn't the Gemara always ask, a Navi Rashoy L'chadesh Davar. A Navi can't innovate a new mitzvah. If the mitzvah is not in the Chumash, a Navi can't come along and say, there's a mitzvah that you really need to fulfill. It has to be in the Chumash. Where in the Chumash is it? By the way, I want to share with you an amazing question of the Brisker Rav. The Rambam has something called Yud Gimel Ikrim. I'm afraid to say this in Lakewood. This might be very controversial, but here I could say, yeah?
It's a safe zone.
What?
It's a safe zone.
A safe zone, okay. Everybody knows about the Yud Gimel Ikrim of the Rambam. Some people say it after davening. Are there Yud Gimel Ikrim in Judaism? Is there such a thing? Of Yud Gimel Ikrim? There are 13 principles of faith? What does that mean? What is an Ikr? Let's say somebody says, I believe in the whole Torah except for the pasuk, V'achlis loitan timna. I'm not into that pasuk. He's an apikoros. What if somebody takes out one ois of the Torah? Nah. So what's the difference between an Ikr and is tefillin an Ikr? Tefillin's not an Ikr. Tefillin is not one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. What about Shabbos? Is Shabbos one of the Ikrim? If someone doesn't keep Shabbos, they're a mumar. If they pick up wine and the wine is not mavushal, you can't drink it. A very interesting halacha. What if, sometimes you have somebody at the table, maybe they're not shomer tar mitzvos, maybe they're not shomer Shabbos, and you have this bottle of wine. It's an expensive bottle of wine, so you're afraid to let them touch it. They're about to touch it. You jump on them, you tackle them. No, let me do it, the halacha is if you pour someone who's not shomer Shabbos wine, and you pour into their cup, they didn't touch it, and then they drank 95% of the cup, and then they say, can I have some more? And then you pour more into their cup. The little droplets of wine in their cup, al yedei nitzuk, the halach is nitzuk chibur, the pouring of your bottle into their leftover wine, it could render the yayin esach. So if they want wine, you say, let me give you a new cup. New cup, was it? No, it's more respectful to give you a new cup, So if somebody doesn't believe in Shabbos, they're a mumar. So what's an Ikr? By the way, Reb Chaim Brisker takes the Rambam at face value, that they're Yud Gimel Ikrim. And so what's the difference between an Ikr and not an Ikr? So Reb Chaim coined the following expression, Nebuch and apikoros is oichet and apikoros. It's a lumdus. The lumdus is like this. If somebody doesn't wear tzitzis because they don't believe in tzitzis, so they're not makabel the Torah. They're not a mammon. They have a din of an apikoros. But what if somebody doesn't wear tzitzis because they never learned about it? They don't have the privilege of a Jewish education. They're not apikoros. They never learned about it. If they would have learned about it, probably they would be mekayim it. Says Reb Chaim, that's by regular mitzvahs, where we say, Nebuch, an Amaretz, is only an Amaretz. But if somebody never learned the Yud Gimel Ikrim, even at no fault of their own, they're Nebuch and apikoros, they're oichet and apikoros. In other words, Reb Chaim says there's a difference between the Ikrim and any other mitzvah in the Torah. Other mitzvahs you have to observe, but if you don't have the privilege of an education, you never learned about it, okay? When you get around to it, one day you'll be mekayim it. But if you never learnt about the Yud Gimel Ikrim at no fault of your own, Reb Chaim says, what he calls Nebuch and apikoros is oichet and apikoros. He doesn't know about it. He doesn't know about the fundamentals of Judaism. So we can't call him a mammon. That's Reb Chaim. Most Achronim have a different take on the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Namely, that there are not Yud Gimel Ikrim. Chassam Sofer writes in a tshuva that the Yud Gimel Ikrim do not have authoritative status, meaning there is no difference between tzitzis and Mashiach. There's no difference between tefillin and tchias hamesim. There's no difference between shatnez and hashgacha pratis. All the mitzvahs are yisoidei ha'emuna. You have to embrace all of them. In fact, Abarbanel says that the Rambam never meant to create Yud Gimel Ikrim. The Abarbanel brings many rayos. The Abarbanel wrote 3 Sfarim on the Bias HaMashiach. He wrote a trilogy called Mashmiei Yeshua. The Abarbanel says if there was something called Yud Gimel Ikrim, you could be sure they would be in the Aseres HaDibros, not the Aseres HaDibros. And if there were Yud Gimel Ikrim, you know who must talk about them? Something called Shas Bavli. If it's not in the Bavli, then it doesn't exist. Nowhere in Talmud Bavli or Yerushalmi does it say anything about Yud Gimel Ikrim. If there would be Yud Gimel Ikrim, the Torah should begin Bereshis Bara Elokim Yud Gimel Ikrim. It's not in Bereshis, it's not in Talmud Bavli, it's not in Chazal, it doesn't exist. So what's the Rambam doing? The Rambam, for beginners, try to codify basic ideas of Judaism, but not that they have more chashivus than any other chelik of Torah. Again, that's Rabbi Nachman Sofer. Reb Chaim took it at face value. But, what I'm getting at is, everybody knows the 12th ikar of the Rambam is, you ready for this kasha? Ani mamin be'emunah shalema b'vias HaMashiach. V'yaf al pi sheyisma meya im kol zeh achak eloi b'chol yom sheyavai. So this Rambam is the most difficult statement in all the writings of the Rambam. Why? Because the Rambam's a posek. He's not one of the Balei HaTosfos, right? You know, there's a big difference between Rambam and the Balei HaTosfos. The Balei HaTosfos say, V'im toimar, v'yesh loimar, right? If you're going to ask a kasha, I'll give you an answer. Or ve'afa gav, and if you're going to ask this, mikol makoim. There's a shakla v'tari in the Balei HaTosfos. There's question, there's answer. There's strong questions, there's strong answers. There's temas, there's v'im toimars, there's v'yafa gavs. The Rambam doesn't ask no questions and he doesn't give no answers. The Rambam says the sukkah should be 20 amos tall. If you make it too small, it's puzzle. The Rambam doesn't ask questions and he doesn't give answers. All of a sudden, when it comes to Mashiach, the Rambam became a Bala Tosfos. The Rambam has a kasha. Really? You believe in Mashiach? So what's taking so long? Where is he? V'im toimar, v'afal pisha yisma meya. Where's Mashiach? Frek the Rambam. Where is he? And for the Rambam, I don't know, but I'm still waiting for him. What happened to the Rambam all of a sudden? When it comes to Mashiach, the Rambam has a kasha, and the Rambam gives a teretz. Why doesn't the Rambam ask a kasha? Ani mamin be'emunah shalema shabari yisbrach shemai einoi guf v'lo yasigu masiga guf v'im toimar v'haksiv einei Hashem yad Hashem v'yesh loimar dibro Torah kloshim b'nei Adam. Or ani mamin be'emunah shalema shabari yisbrach shemai hu bari omanig l'chol ha'olam. But what about Tzaddik v'Raloi? I don't know. It's an exception to the rule. Why all of a sudden by no other ikar does the Rambam have kashas? He doesn't give terutzim. All of a sudden by Mashiach, the Rambam has a kasha and the Rambam gives a teretz. Ask the Brisker Rav. Says the Brisker Rav, you're not understanding the Rambam correctly. The Rambam doesn't ask questions and the Rambam doesn't give answers. The Rambam's a posek. The Rambam is articulating that when it comes to Mashiach, there are two distinct principles of emunah. Principle number one is you must believe in the concept of Mashiach. Principle number two is, let's say I say, Rabbi Yud, you believe in Mashiach? Yeah. But the thing is, right now, I'm working in finance, or I'm working in nursing homes, or I'm working in insurance, and I'm very busy. This season I'm very busy. And then next I'm going on vacation, and then it's Yom Naram, and then it's tax season. I don't really have time to think about Mashiach. You let me know when he comes. I believe in him. Yes. Do you believe in him? I check off the box, I believe in him. Okay. And what do you do about that belief? I don't do anything. I live in Lakewood. I have my life. I'm doing my thing. Says the Rambam, no. You know what such a person is called? Listen to these words of the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. Mi she'enoi mamin boi, mi she'enoi mechakel lebiyasai, Loi b'divrei neviim bilvadhu koifer, ela b'toiras Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rambam is mechadesh that if a Yid believes in Mashiach, but is not actively awaiting the coming of Mashiach, he's a koifer in the Torah. You ever hear such a chiddush of the Rambam? The Rambam's not asking a question, where is Mashiach? And the answer is, I don't know, but I'm waiting for him anyway. The Rambam's articulating two principles of faith. Principle number one is, you have to believe in Mashiach. Principle number two is, you have to actively await his coming. Rabbi Yid, where are you? What are you thinking about? I'm waiting for Mashiach. I'm waiting for Mashiach. Really? You're such a tzaddik. Say, no, I'm not a tzaddik. I'm just a Jew. I'm just Jewish. My mother was Jewish, so I had a bris milah, and I keep Shabbos. But even more important, according to the Rambam, than bris and Shabbos, is I'm actively awaiting Mashiach. And it's so important that even though la'achar me'ah ve'esrim shana, one of the 6 big questions are not, did you put on tefillin every day, although you're going to have to answer in the affirmative. And they're not going to ask, do you wear a beged of dalet kamfos, although you're going to have to. And they're not going to ask, were you shomer Shabbos? Those are not some of the biggies, if you can imagine such a thing. Yes, you're going to have to fulfill all of them. But they're going to ask, did you actively await the coming of Mashiach? So can I just ask you one simple question? It does say in the Torah you have to wear tefillin. It does say in the Torah you have to keep Shabbos. Could you tell me what parsha it says I have to actively await the coming of Mashiach? I must have missed that parsha. I mean, I was Maver Sedra before. I did it with Rashi. Could somebody please tell me where in the Chumash of Moshe Rabbeinu does it say? So you imagine this is such a thing? That means la'achar me'ah ve'esrim shana. One of the biggest questions you're going to have to answer is, did you actively await the coming of Mashiach? So where does it say we need to do this? Rava said it? Rava made this up? Rava's an Amoira. A Navi said it? Ein Navi Rashay l'chadesh davar. And the Rambam says, it says it in the Chumash. Where? You ready for this? Comes the Brisker Rav, and the Brisker Rav says, it's in this week's parsha. It's in this week's parsha. The only thing is, the Brisker Rav says, Divrei Torah, Aniyim b'makom echad, v'ashirim b'makom acher. To understand the pasuk in this week's parsha, you need to know a pasuk in Hosea, Perek Yud Gimel, pasuk Zayin. If you don't know the pasuk in Hosea, you can't read the pasuk in Parshas Balak. Okay? Actually, if you look in the Rambam, when the Rambam talks about, now, I just want to point out, it's not enough to believe in Mashiach. We need to find the pasuk in Chumash that you have to actively await his coming. I want to tell you what it means to actively await his coming. My Zayda, my father's father, passed away a few years ago at 106 years old. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Nachum Zemba, okay? Talking about, Gedolim of many, many generations ago. So, he passed away on Pesach morning, and my father asked him, Zaydi, everything okay? Because he wasn't talking. My grandfather said, I'm just waiting for Mashiach. And he had Misas Nashika. Those were his last words. He waited for Mashiach, Kiviyachal, as if, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this in Lakewood. Imagine there's something not in Lakewood called Amazon. Yeah? Imagine you would order something on Amazon and they would say it's coming on Monday or Tuesday. And you really want it. And the doorbell rings. So you go to the door because it's likely the thing you ordered. That's how we waited Mashiach. Not like something you talk about. We talk about it. I had the zechus, I grew up in Flatbush on Emin 31st. I had the zechus to walk to Harav Avigdor Miller, Zertzag L'Bracha Shul, very often on Shabbos. I saw him many, many times. I spoke to him many times. I've seen many great people. One of the ways to, so to speak, identify the greatness of Rav Miller was, we talk about Olam Haba. Do you believe in Olam Haba? Of course I believe in it. Are you Mamin Be'emunah Shlema? Of course I'm Mamin Be'emunah Shlema. To Rav Miller, he didn't talk about it. It was reality. It was a reality. Like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says, the greatest distance in the world is between your heart and your mind. Because we know everything, we don't feel it. We don't feel it. So Rav Miller had emunah chushas. The Rambam is saying that a Yid cannot just believe in Mashiach, he has to actively await his coming. So you ready for this pasuk? The pasuk is, Erenu v'lai ata. Bilam's talking. I see it, but not now. He's talking about Mashiach. Ashurenu v'lai karayv. Anybody know what the word Ashurenu means? Presumably it means, I see it, but it's not close. Like in Lashon of, I think we say in the Slicha, sure, ki avdu chasidenu. Sure, look. So you read the pasuk, Ashurenu v'loi karav. I see it, but it's not close. Says the Brisker Rav, Ashurenu doesn't mean I see it. To understand what the word Ashurenu means, you have to look in the pasuk in Hosea. In Hosea is a very interesting pasuk. It says like this: Va'ehi lohem k'may shachal. I'm going to be to them like a lion. Kenomer. What is a nomer? Like a leopard. Bederech Ashur. So you read the pasuk, and you think it means I'm going to be like a leopard. Bederech Ashur, on the road to Ashur, on the road to Assyria. Rashi in Hosea says, even though every single time in Tanakh it says Ashur, it means Assyria, except for this time, because when it says Ashur, there's always a dot in the shin. And here, there's no dot in the shin. There's no dagesh in the shin. Ashur here doesn't mean Assyria. Ashur means Kinomer, like a leopard, bederech, on the road, Ashur. Says Rashi, E'eroiv, I wait in ambush. Like in the pasuk, Ashurenu, v'loi karaiv. So Rashi in Hosea is saying that the pasuk in this week's parasha, Ashurenu v'loi karaiv, means I wait in ambush for the coming of Mashiach, even though it's not close. Says the Brisker Rav, this pasuk articulates the idea that not only do we have to believe in the coming of Mashiach, we have to wait in ambush. Waiting in ambush means you're always on high alert. Maybe it's coming. Maybe it's coming. Maybe this is it. You wake up every morning. A Yid wakes up in the morning and he says, Ribbonu Shalom, I'm doing tshuva. I'm returning to you. I want my neshama to be in the right condition to makabel Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. This is not a mitzvah. This is more than a mitzvah. A mitzvah, you're not going to be asked on that big test. Were you mekayim the mitzvah? This is one of the 6 most important things a Yid has to do in this world. Await in ambush for the coming of Mashiach. That's how the Brisker Rav understands. Where in the Chumash it talks about awaiting the coming of Mashiach. But I want to share with you something else. There's a smak. You ever hear the smak? Rabbi Yitzchak of Korbil. Rabbi Yitzchak of Korbil is one of the Monei HaMitzvahs. You know, the Rambam has his list of 613. The Ramban has his list. The Bahag. The smak has a list of the 613 mitzvahs. Says the smak in mitzvah aleph. You know what mitzvah aleph is? Anoichi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeisecha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Says the smak, part of believing that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is to believe that Hashem is going to take us out of Lakewood. He doesn't use Lakewood as an example. It's also Cedarhurst. It's also Muncie. It's also Flatbush. You know, all these places, they all have one thing in common. They have a lot of Torah, but they're still gullus. They're gullus. Part of believing that Hashem's going to took us out of Mitzrayim is awaiting the coming of Mashiach. You hear such a thing? Part of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim is the belief in the coming of Mashiach. Says the Smak, when Rava said in Masechta Shabbos that after 120 they're going to ask you Tzipisa Liyeshua, where did Rava get it from? He got it from the pasuk Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisecha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. It's Oyem V'Noira. That means the first words that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Klal Yisrael were, I want you to await the coming of Mashiach. Understand that? The first thing that the Ribono Shel Olam told the Jewish people, the very first communication of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klal Yisrael, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, and therefore you need to be Metzapa Liyeshua. I took you out of Mitzrayim. By the way, just to explain this a little bit, Rabbeinu Bechaya writes in many places that Yitzias Mitzrayim was the pre-enactment, the Masei Avos Siman Labanim, to the Gula HaSida. So therefore, Yitzias Mitzrayim was, so to speak, the trial run, the dress rehearsal for the Gula HaSida. Rabbeinu Bechaya says whatever happened in Mitzrayim will repeat itself again by the Gula HaSida. Rabbeinu Bechaya says there will be Makos, there will be Kriyas Yamsuf, we'll travel through a Midbar. The Rabbeinu Bechaya writes in Kara Kemach, Kol Hanaviyim Misnaveim Besignoin Echad, that the Gula HaSida will parallel Yitzias Mitzrayim exactly. So part of belief in the coming of in Yitzias Mitzrayim is believing in the coming of Mashiach. So I want to tell you a very simple chiddush. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the well-known teaching of the Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo. I actually remember Harav Yitzchak Isby teaching this Ramban. This goes back 30 years ago. The Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo, he wants to know why there's so many mitzvahs that are Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. You know, if your wife tells you, do me a favor, could you take out the garbage and don't forget? You say, okay, don't worry, I won't forget. No, you're going to forget. So take a string and wrap it around your finger. She says, you know what, that's not enough. You're still going to forget. I want you to put signs on every single door that tonight, before you go to sleep, you should take out the garbage. And then every Friday night, I want you to pick up a cup of wine and announce to the family that you're going to take out the garbage. You say, okay, it's a little bit, I think I'm going to remember. No, you're not going to remember. So I want you 7 days a year not to eat a certain kind of food so you don't forget. I mean, we got it, enough already. So the Ramban is bothered. I understand Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. It's a very important thing. But how I have to, on every beged, I have to make strings on every beged so I don't forget, and take leather straps and limit my circulation in my arm and on my head not to forget Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, and put it up on every single doorpost. Why is Yitzias Mitzrayim so important? So Ramban famously says that the events of Yitzias Mitzrayim demonstrated all the basic truths of Yiddishkeit, that Hashem exists, and Hashem controls the world, and Hashem has Yediyah, He knows everything that's taking place in the world, and Hashem has unlimited power, and Hashem communicates to the Navi. And since these are all the great principles of Judaism, Hashem says, I never want you to forget it. So this way, you're going to put a mark on every item of clothing you have, and you're going to write it on every doorpost, and you're going to wrap it on your arm every morning for at least 45 minutes, so that even an hour later, you could see the marks on your hand. And 7 days a year, you're not going to eat any bread to remember I took you out of Mitzrayim. And another 7 days a year, you're going to leave your house and sit in a hut when it's not so comfortable outside, so you don't forget it. And every Friday night, you're going to pick up a cup of wine and you're going to tell your family, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Why? So that you never, ever forget that I took you out of Mitzrayim, and that will demonstrate that you believe in me, and that you believe I created the world, and that I control everything that happens in the world. I just want to say one simple idea. If you put together the Ramban and the Smak, it comes out a davar noira. Because according to the Smak, part of remembering Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim is the belief that Hashem is going to bring Mashiach. That means that every time you put on tefillin, aside from thinking, I'm putting on tefillin to remember Hashem took me out of Mitzrayim, one should also think I'm putting on tefillin as an expression of my anticipating the coming of the Geula. That's a simple kavana of wearing tefillin, because part of believing in Yetzias Mitzrayim is believing and anticipating and waiting in ambush for the coming of the Geula. So when you put on your tefillin in the morning, you have an opportunity to exercise, to be mitzapeh liyeshua. I want to tell you another very important halacha. The Torah says wear tefillin. So how often? How often? The Torah doesn't say how often. Is it once a year? Like Parsha Zachar? Is it once a month? Is it always? I mean, where do we get this from that we wear tefillin once a day? Anybody know? Like, who decided once a day? By the way, is tefillah d'oraisa or d'Rabbanan? Anybody know? It's machlokes, right? The Ramban says only Beis Sarah. The Rambam says tefillah is d'oraisa in principle. 3 times a day is midrabanan. And how many times a day is d'oraisa? The Rambam says once a day. Who told him once a day? Where do you get that from? The Kesef Mishnah writes in Hilchos Tefillah, Parak Aleph, Halacha Aleph, that if the Torah says to do something and it doesn't say when, there is a reasonable svara to explain what it means is once a day. Therefore, the Rambam says tefillah is once a day. By the way, if you look in the writings of the Chafetz Chaim says, there's a mitzvah in the Torah called Avas Hashem. Okay, great. How often? Once a year, once a month. Chafetz Chaim says, it doesn't say it has to be once a day. Therefore, the Chafetz Chaim says, when you say the words Ve'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you should try once a day to mekayim the mitzvah d'oraisa, that you should feel avot HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Chafetz Chaim says, if you didn't have time to do it then, don't eat breakfast in the morning until just like, I davened and I put on tefillin, I was also mekayim the mitzvah of Avas Hashem. So if there's a mitzvah in the Torah of tzipisa liyeshua, How many times a day should you be mitzapel Yeshua? At least once a day. At least once a day. When should I do it? I don't know. I'm going to give you now 1,000 times during the day when you could do it. When you put on tzitzis, because you're remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it's a time to yearn for the coming of Mashiach. When you put on tefillin, when you remember Yetzias Mitzrayim in Kriya Shema, when you remember Yetzias Mitzrayim in Birchas Kriya Shema. But I have another one. I'm going to ask you a personal question now, and I'm hoping you could respond to me, even though it's just between the two of us and TorahAnytime.com, okay? Are you the kind of guy that walks through doors? Are you like a door walking kind of guy? Like when you go from one place to another, do you walk through a door? You could tell me. Or you like go through the window? Presumably, I saw a lot of guys walking out of the door. I'm assuming you walk through doors. There's this thing on the door that everybody loves to kiss. Stop kissing it. Don't kiss it until you're mekayim the mitzvah d'oraisa, which is to think about it. Why are you kissing the mezuzah all day? First stop for a minute and think. The Rambam says the mitzvah d'oraisa of mezuzah is to think the mezuzah testifies to the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do me a favor, stop kissing the mezuzah and losing the opportunity that it presents. But just, the mezuzah is not just a reminder Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Did you know every single doorway you walk through is an opportunity to be mitzapel Yeshua? So you walked from this oyhel to the next oyhel to the next oyhel. You had 3 chances to be mitzapel Yeshua. If you hang around Mordy Shteibel long enough, in one day you could probably be mitzapel Yeshua a few dozen times just in this Makom Kadosh. And how many doorways you're constantly walking around? You know, we make Meya brachos b'chol yom. So are you mitzapel Yeshua Meya pamim b'chol yom? When you tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom, do you mean it? Do you mean it? The Arizal says that if you can't muster the focus more than this opportunity, this is the bare bones minimum. When you say the bracha as Tzemach David, and you say the words Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom, this is the specific opportunity to mekayem the inyan of tzipiyah liyeshua, so that acher me'av esrim shana, when they ask, no, Rabbi Yid, did you do it? You did all the doorways and the tefillin? He said, look, yes, I did it. When I said the bracha as Tzemach David, that is the predestined opportunity to be mitzapel Yeshua. I just want to share with you 2 more ideas. It's already Erev Shabbos. I want to point out, if you look in Kabbalas Shabbos, L'chadoidi l'kraskala, it's written by Reb Shlomo Alkabetz. You would expect this beautiful niggin. Probably they have a very beautiful Kabbalas Shabbos here. I can only imagine. You ever notice that if you actually pay attention to the words, I'm sorry to say, it has nothing to do with Shabbos. It's not about Shabbos. Except for the first 2 stanzas, L'chadoidi l'kraskala, Shom Razacha l'kraskala, and then on the end, Boi b'shalom, when you stand up, what? Where am I? But the rest of L'chadoidi is not about Shabbos at all. Mikdash Melech is about rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. Hisnari may offer kumi, Livshi b'gdei al yadbet is about the restoration of Malchus Beis David. Uri, Sher Daber, we're asking Hashem to give Nevuah to Klal Yisrael. Yom in a small Tefroitzi that Hashem should expand Yerushalayim. Could somebody please tell me why in the world are we Makabel Shabbos with a piyut that has nothing to do with Shabbos except for the opening and the closing? It's all about anticipating the building of the Mashiach, the building of the Beis HaMikdash, and the coming of Mashiach, and the Malchus Beis David, and the restoration of Nevuah. Says Hagoyin Rav Moshe Shapiro. This is a game changer. You ready for this? The Gemara Masechta Taina says, when was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Matzai Shabbos. Berishain, Ubesheni. Both the first Beis HaMikdash and second Beis HaMikdash were destroyed Matzai Shabbos. The Maral says, it's not a coincidence. The Beis HaMikdash can only be destroyed on a Matzah Shabbos. Why? Because so long as you're headed toward Shabbos, there can't be Churban. Because Shabbos and the Beis Hamikdash are synonymous. It means like this. We know in Machshava there's a concept. There are times and places that are parallel, that coincide. It's called Ashan, Olam, Shana, Nefesh. Place, time, people. What Shabbos is in time, the Beis Hamikdash is in place. Shabbos is the Beis Hamikdash of the week. The Beis Hamikdash is Shabbos of the world. As long as you're headed toward Shabbos, you can't have Churban. The only thing is, friends, we're always headed to Shabbos. Hayom Yom Rishon b'Shabbos, Hayom Sheni b'Shabbos, Hayom Shlishi b'Shabbos. There's only one Zman the whole week that we're moving away from Shabbos. Matzoi Shabbos. Churban is only possible Matzoi Shabbos. Says Rav Moshe Shapiro, words that I'm not familiar that he has anywhere else. He says, therefore it comes out halacha ulamaisa. Since there's a great area of avodas Hashem, of being mitzapel Yeshua, when is the designated time to mekayim tzipiyah Yeshua? Kabbalas Shabbos. As you're anticipating Shabbos, you are at the same time anticipating the coming of Mashiach. So we say, Ribbon Sham Lekra Shabbos L'chuvanelcha, and as part of that, Mikdash Melech Yermelucha Kumitzi Mitoich Afecha, raise up the Beis Hamikdash from the ashes. And when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we lost a lot of important goodies. We lost Malchus Beis David, bring back the Malchus Beis David. We lost Nevuah, Uri Sher Daberi, bring back Nevuah. Yushalayim was shrunk. Yom Esmal Tefroitzi, expand Yerushalayim. Part and parcel of Kabbalas Shabbos. It's an exercise in Tzipiyah Yeshua. That's what Kabbalas Shabbos is. As we're anticipating and greeting the Shabbos, we're anticipating the coming of the Geula. So I just want to share one last idea. The Gemara says in Masechta Rosh Hashanah on the pasuk, Tzion hi, doiresh ein la. She is Tzion. No one seeks her out. You remember what the Gemara says? Meklal deboi drisha. From here we learn out, you gotta seek her out. Do you remember the pasuk? L'shichnoi sidrishu uvasa shama. L'shichnoi sidrishu. You gotta be doiresh the Mishkan. Says the Malbim, what does it mean you have to be doiresh the Mishkan? David HaMelech, there's nothing he could do. He was waiting the command of the Navi, that the Navi would tell David where to build the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Malbim, even though the Rebbeinu Shem is going to tell us where to build the Beis HaMikdash and when to build the Beis HaMikdash, you got to seek it out. So I was always wondering, what does that mean you have to seek it out? You have to go there? You can't halachically go there. You can't go to the Harabayas. So what are Chazal saying? You have to be doireshet. What does it mean to be doireshet? I was looking. What does it mean to be doiresh the Beis HaMikdash? You know where I found an answer? In a sefer from Reb Chaim Kanievsky, written in English. It's called Art Scroll Zmiros of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. I said, oh, it must be in Lashon Kodesh. No, it doesn't exist. He didn't write it in Lashon. Somebody wrote Reb Chaim's Chidushim on Zmiros in English. Reb Chaim Kanievsky said like this on the words in what? On the Zmiros where we say in Baruch Kel Elyon. What do we say in Baruch Kel Elyon? V'hu yidraish l'tzion. V'hu yidraish l'tzion. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, you want to know what it means to be doiresh? Miyad shoifech dam ha'adam ba'adam dama yishafech. Ani edroish damai. Says Reb Chaim. Targum says at be'ina. I will be toiveya. Says Reb Chaim, when the Gemara says you have to be Darish Sion, It means you have to be toivei tzion, like a debt. You know, how do we daven for the Beis HaMikdash? We say, Ribono Shel Olam, send me parnasa, send me shidduchim, send me bracha. Oh yeah, and also when it's good for you, at your convenience, at the right time, also rebuild Yerushalayim. You know, we have this whole laundry list of things we daven for, and then we're like, ho-hum, some of the, you know, like, when it's good for you, Ribono Shel Olam. You know when it's good. By parnasa, we don't say, Hashem, you know how much money, you know how much I need to make. We say, Ribono Shel Olam, I know I need this, give it to me now. When it comes to refuah, Ribono Shel Olam, I demand it. When it comes to tzion, we become very polite all of a sudden. Ribono Shel Olam, I know you have cheshbonos, and I'm not pushing, and I'm not asking, I don't want to inconvenience you. Forget it, never mind. No, says Reb Chaim, when it comes to Binyan Beis HaMikdash, you need to be toivei it like it's a choiv. Ribono Shel Olam, you promised it to us, you told it to us, V'Yerushalayim ircha barachamim tashuv, v'sishkain b'soicha, ka'asher dibarta, you said it. I found in the Chafetz Chaim, on the Siddur, Chafetz Chaim says that when we're mispalel for Geula, it has to be begeder a tviyah. We have to be toivei it. Especially this time of the year, during the 3 weeks. This is a time that's already predestined, that it's going to be nishapech for Yomim Tovim LiYisrael. So Be'ezus Hashem, we're always hoping for the Geula, but especially in the times we're living in, I think we could say more than ever, even though we always think Mashiach didn't come for the earlier generations, it didn't come for the Rishonim, it didn't come for the Achroinim, it didn't come for our Zaydas, it didn't come for our Babas. I'll just tell you one thing. The Arizal would tell Reb Chaim Vital, he'd say, Reb Chaim, your neshama is greater than even the greatest Tanoim. So Reb Chaim said, what are you talking about? I thought you told me yesterday that compared to the earlier generations, I'm nothing. So Arizal said, maybe, but Hashem judges a person relative to the times they live in. The Arizal said to Reb Chaim Vital here in Sfas in the 16th century, where the koyach hatuma is out of control, a small mitzvah that you do today in Sfas is worth 1,000 times more than the greatest mitzvahs of the earliest generations. You can imagine, wow, the koyach hatuma that must have been out of control in 16th century Tzfas. I could tell you one thing. If the Ari said that the koyach hatuma was out of control 500 years ago, what would the Ari say today? He would say the koyach hatuma is on steroids or something. The koyach hatuma today, it's Ar Chaim HaKadosh's yahrzeit. Ar Chaim HaKadosh says in Mitzrayim, we were not able to fall to the 50th level because then we never would have gotten out. Ar Chaim HaKadosh writes that in the end of days, we will be able to fall to the 50th level because through the Koyach HaTorah, that will be able to yank us out. I don't know what level we're on, but whatever level they're on in Mitzrayim, I think we could make a strong case that, it's being rivaled. But Be'ezus Hashem, we have a tremendous Koyach HaTorah today. And as beloved as Reb Chaim Vital was 500 years ago, we could say that Be'enei Hashem, a Yid today, is more beloved in the eyes of Hashem than ever in the history of the whole world. And if a mitzvah that was done 500 years ago was so beloved in Hashem's eyes, you could be sure that one shir today, one dvar Torah today, one act of hiskabros hayetzer today, one tefillah today, perhaps is more powerful than all the tefillos of earlier generations. In Nosach Ashkenaz, the tefillah goes, Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu. So most Siddurim will translate it, with a great love you loved us Hashem. Says Reb Schwab, Rabba doesn't mean great, it means ever increasing. Ever increasing. As much as Hashem loved your great-grandparents, He loved your grandparents more. And as much as Hashem loved your grandparents, He loved your parents more. And as much as Hashem loved your parents, Ahava Rabba, His love for you is even more. And as much as Hashem loves you, don't underestimate your children. Hashem may love them even more. So the power that Hashem has given us today, what koyach we have today? In the history of Klal Yisrael, we have more koyach than maybe We don't like to say, by the way, Rabbi Yerucham in Parsha Shlach says that we don't like to say this too much. He says, you could have a bacher harving on a rishon. The bacher has no real clue what the rishon's talking about. But in the eyes of Hashem, the learning of the bacher might be more dear than the rishon himself. He says, Rabbi Yerucham, we don't like to talk about it too much. But it's the reality. So the publisher, look it up. Publisher says, if this sounds foreign to you, the Ari already told this to Reb Chaim Vital in Shar HaGolgolim. So you have to understand the power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed you with in our generation. And we should take advantage of this kayach, and Bezos Hashem, all of our Torah, and all of our Masim Tovim, and all of our Tfilos should help us get to the finish line, B'karev Mamish. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We should all be Zoiche to the Gula Shlema, and the Tzoim Haravi, V'Tzoim HaChamishi, Yeh LeBeis Yehuda, L'Sasayin, U'Lesimcha, U'Lemayadim Tayim. Thank you very much.